difficulties and let them know that we are back in demand, man. Happy Keep Rising Sunday, everybody. Happy Keep Rising season. Happy KRS-One. If you didn't get the memo, it's our anniversary. And we're not just doing an anniversary day. We're taking a whole damn season, man. Keep rising. We've been doing this for a whole year now, and it absolutely blows my mind. But before we get started, I wanted to highlight some very special people who've made this journey possible. We have some people who have been our patrons since February and March of last year. Literally, since we've gotten started, they've been supporting us. And that's one whole year of consistent monthly financial support. So I first and foremost want to call out the Apostate Sisters. The Apostate Sisters are one of our earliest patrons, Dr. Charles Payette, who is actually one of our top donors for the year. And then even John Rexo. These are patrons who've been supporting us for a whole year on Patreon, just consistently, and it's amazing. So team, we've got to get a special thank you out to all three of them for a full year of support. But then also over the past year, I've met some very enthusiastic and supportive new friends who have invested in our growth. There was Stacy and Dee from the Stacy's Mom podcast who gifted me my first Logitech camera and USB mic when I was still shooting videos from my cell phone. And the camera you're seeing me on right now is that camera. That mic you might see in the background is attached to my other computer now. But then also Jimmy Snow from over at The Line, he upgraded my system, added the Elgato face cam, which you're looking at me now on, and the Wavelength mic, which I'm using now. These are things that Jimmy and The Line added to our setup. And then even Chris Mallard from the Daily Atheist Morning Show provided me with a teleprompter and a green screen. You can't see it, but it's over there right now in my corner. And a green screen. Not to mention, he actually took an executive producer role for one of my videos, which means he did the scripting and he did the editing and the cutting did the editing and the cutting for that video for me as well. So the big point is that the progress we've made over this year for the channel, Darante LaMar, the community, BridgeCity Global, and the campaign, DLDD World Group, it has been because of people like you, all of us who were once strangers now being brought together through the medium of content and conversations. Now, if I was still a Christian, I would say that this is the hand of God, that God somehow picked us. But as a humanist with the sociological comprehension of people activity, I understand that this has been the hands of humanity, that we weren't picked by a God, but we were lifted by a people. I wish I had somebody out there. And that's people who identify with this message and mission of not just letting go of what doesn't work, but also getting up and becoming a part of the work. So I just want to thank everybody who has joined this global movement, man. I want to thank you all from the bottom of my heart. This is amazing. Y'all are some absolutely wonderful people. Some wonderful people. Oh man, this is beautiful. And I see we just got another member. How awesome is that, man? And let me switch this over. I don't want to mess with stuff too much. When I touch stuff, I want to read these chats, but when I touch stuff, things get wonky. So I'm not going to touch them. I'm just going to let y'all know I appreciate y'all. Are y'all ready to get into this conversation today? I've been excited about this ever since last week. Last week was absolutely bananas. It was fire, if I could say so myself. And guess what? I do. It was fire. We opened up a new series of conversations. Called Disagreement Therapy, all right? Disagreement therapy, where we're talking about and learning as a group, as a community, how to disagree, right? And so last week we laid the foundation. We talked about good faith, what it means to show up with honest intent, with curiosity instead of combat, with respect instead of performance. I think I told y'all last week that when it comes to me, if good faith is not in the conversation, neither am I. Yep, if the other person does not show up to the conversation in good faith, I'm likely not going to participate in that conversation. And so we had a really good time dissecting that and unpacking that last week. But today we're building on that, because even good faith isn't enough if the conversation itself has nowhere to go. So here's the question that drives everything that we're doing today. How do we rise through disagreement? And how do we know when the conversation has reached its limit? See, I call it the mutual utility of outcome. And it's about recognizing when a disagreement can become a bridge and when it's just a brick wall. In this age of polarization, clashing narratives, and curated outrage, it's easy to forget what a conversation is even for. Too many of us are stopping at the last rest area of our understanding, camped out in our comfort zone, rehearsing the same points, defending the same ideas, afraid to move forward. But here's what I've learned. If the only outcome is me being right and you walking away bitter, we both lost something. Because I'm not here to win arguments. I'm here to build alignment. I'm not looking for followers to subdue. I'm looking for partners to build with. Partners in thinking, partners in curiosity, damn it, partners in rising. And every disagreement, every tension, every friction point isn't just something to survive. It's an opportunity to refine, to evolve, to clarify what we stand on and what we're open to. But here's the key. Not every conversation is about winning. Some are about weighing. Where's the mutual growth? Where's the real possibility for movement? Sometimes what looks like a conflict is really a mirror. Sometimes it's a window. And if we look closely, it's not about who's right. It's about who's ready. Ready to learn, ready to unlearn, ready to expand the frame instead of defending the box they were handed. So I don't walk away to avoid, I lean in to assess. Is this a gap I can help close? Is this a difference I can help bridge? Because that's how we keep rising, not by proving we're right, but by choosing where our growth belongs and building with the people who are reaching to. And if we're going to keep rising, we can't keep stopping at the last rest area of what we know. We've got to be willing to drive further, to ask better questions, to step back when needed, and to build what's actually possible between us. Let's begin. Find some rising emojis to light up the chat as we get ready to have this conversation. Let's get this thing started. Either keep rising or all rise. However y'all want to do this thing. Y'all let your boy know. Y'all let your boy know. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Today we're talking about keep rising, where the goal is for us all to rise. Go ahead and throw some of them emojis in the chat and let folk know that we're rising. And by the way, if you're just coming in, did you not know we're only a year old today, which makes us like one of, if not the fastest growing community in the nation, if not the globe. Yeah, I'll say it. I'll get hyperbolic if I want to. I'll exaggerate it about this thing a little bit, but no, the reality is from 52 to nearly 19,000 now. So wow. And as a way of celebrating that, I don't know what y'all doing. I am. Now you can do what you want to do, but for me, as for me in my house, as they used to say back in the church days, we're going to be celebrating this entire season as rising season. This is what it looks like when humanity starts rising. And so in the spirit of that, we're going to pack some of that in today's conversation. Excuse me. All right, so let's open this thing up. I hope y'all are ready. It's so beautiful to see so many of you people in here. Thank you for the love. We have 26 viewers watching right now. Let's get this thing shared out and see if we can get this thing pumping. All right, so not every disagreement is worth the same energy. This is disagreement therapy. So if you didn't know, this is what we're talking about for the next, we have 2 more weeks of this conversation after today. This is disagreement therapy. Not all disagreements are worth the same energy. Man, I am loving those rising icons. I am loving that. Let's go, folk. Let's go, folk. Sometimes rising isn't pushing through the conflict. It's knowing when to disengage with wisdom and find a different path to clarity. And again, if the goal of the conversation is clarity, when you realize that the path you're on is not going to lead there, it's time to take a different path. So there's nothing wrong with asking yourself, is this actually working? Nope. There's nothing wrong with asking yourself mid-argument, is this actually helping? Are the words that are coming out of my mouth, thank you, Chris Tucker, are the words that are coming out of my mouth actually helping this other person to understand what I'm saying? Are the words that we're saying back to each other actually helping? Is this actually working? Because if it's not, I could be contributing to unnecessary harm. Wow. I wish we would ask ourselves that more often. I wish we would trip right there and just stop and say, like, wait a minute, damn. You know, it used to be if it's not broke, don't fix it. But my question now is, if it's not working, is it hurting? See, that's the question that I ask now. If I'm doing something that's not working, if I'm doing something that's not helping, I got to ask myself, why am I really doing it? And if I'm doing it, and hey, I might have some other reason. I'm not saying there's not any other reason, but I have to ask myself, could this be contributing to unnecessary harm? Oh yeah, this grown folks conversation right here. This is grown folks conversation like right here. Oh, I love that, rising out. See, the real growth isn't always in the argument. Sometimes it's in how you read the room and the reason. So today we're going to discuss how to rise through the disagreement and how to recognize when disengaging is the rising action. We want to talk about how sometimes, when walking away from this one, that might be the most rising thing I can do right now. Getting as far away from this conversation as I possibly can could be the most rising action I can take right now. Like, you know what I'm saying? Oh no, I love being warriors. No, let's be warriors, but let's be warriors with some wisdom. Is this good, y'all? Is this conversation good? We're just getting started. We're just getting started. I haven't even got to the first point yet. Okay, so let's start with differing information and knowledge gaps. So today I am gonna, if we haven't talked about this before in any of these sessions, I do want to introduce these, introduce these to you. Knowledge gaps, knowledge traps, and knowledge caps. That's what we're going to kind of talk through it a little bit about this, because one of the first things you have to deal with is that you're dealing with people with differing information, and some people are dealing with knowledge gaps. You know what I'm saying? Oh man. All right. So people often have access to different facts, sources, or experiences, which leads them to varied conclusions. All right. I do want to read that again. I know it is simple, but I feel like this is something that is often understated. I feel like we don't say this enough. I feel like we don't remind people enough. But let me tell you this, people often have access to different facts. All right, those facts that you have that help you come to your conclusion, you cannot guarantee that somebody else's existence brought them into access or brought them into exposure to those same facts. All right. So people have access to different facts, sources, or experience, and that's what leads to those varied conclusions. So what we need to understand, and this is something I've had to wrestle with in my life, is that if we're operating on different information, we're going to come to different conclusions. Okay. If we're operating on different information, and that's the one thing that we all just realized, if we're operating on different information, then we're going to come to different conclusions. And here's a spoiler alert. Anyone other than you is likely operating on different information than you. I think I've said it in so many of these sessions right now, it might as well be a slogan for me. But other people's lives are not a reflection of you, so you should really limit your expectations on other folk. I'm always shocked when people are shocked about what another person thinks, says, or does when this is somebody you don't even know. Their life doesn't exist for you. What they know and understand about the world has not been crafted by you. You are not the author and the finisher of their faith. Simmer down, young whippersnapper. So people have an entire lived existence before you show up. And so always be mindful that their worldview and the things that they think don't have a damn thing to do with you. These are all things that come from their experience. They're operating, they are operating on different information. It's just a reminder. It's simple. We all know it. We all know this is true. It's simple. But have you ever heard somebody say something and it was just like so shocking to you because you're just like, oh my God, I cannot believe a person said something like that. Like, you know, it happens. What I encourage people to do now is like, yeah, check yourself after that. Like after that, just remind yourself like, oh yeah, that's a stranger. You don't know what strangers think, all right? And the only way you know is you have conversations with people. This is some good stuff, man. This is some good stuff. All right, so when you hit a disagreement, ask yourself, is it a gap? All right. So these are these knowledge gaps. Now, when it's a knowledge gap, they've got some catching up to do. All right. When you notice that the problem is a knowledge gap, the question needs to be, how can this divide be bridged? And watch this. Not necessarily how can I bridge it. Okay, so let's talk about that. All right. Stop trying to be Bridget out here. You are not Inspector Bridget. Stop trying to bridge everybody's gaps. You can't do that. You can be the bridge, but you can't be everybody's bridge. You got to think through this stuff reasonably, rationally. I no longer feel the need to be people's savior. I actually now find that to be patronizing, to feel like I need to save somebody, to feel like somebody else is incapable of doing what they need to do for their lives unless I say the right thing, you know, like that is patronizing as hell. All right. Now, I am not saying that I am not capable of helping somebody else. I'm not saying I'm not capable of saying something that sparks to somebody. But what I want to share here is the important thing is when you realize that there's a gap, that there's a knowledge gap, there's a leap in understanding. Like many times when you're talking to people about issues, and let me bring this back front camera, let me bring this back front and center. When you're talking to people about issues such as things that are going on with transgender people, a lot of the people you're going to be engaging with have a knowledge gap. So some of them might be talking about biology when they should be talking about sociology. Some of them will be talking about sex when they should be talking about gender, and they don't understand those differences. And because there is a knowledge gap there that likely started somewhere around 7th grade, because there is a knowledge gap there, it's going to be very difficult to engage that conversation until you actually get them caught up in the science. And it's going to be really hard to get them caught up in the science in that conversation. So that's when you ask yourself, how can the bridge be divided, or how can the divide be bridged? Not necessarily how can I do it, right? Because if the answer is how can I do it, you immediately put yourself in the place where I'm the only one who can fix this. And the truth of the matter is you might have jumped to that place unreasonably. You might not be a person who is able to contribute to this conversation. And that's why the question should be, how can this divide be bridged, right? So when you're talking to the person, you realize there's a chasm of knowledge that's missing. And that's what I begin to realize when I was talking to a lot of people, whether they're attached to religious superstition or conspiracy superstition, whatever type of superstition. In many cases, what they're running into, what I'm dealing with, is somebody with a knowledge gap. Like their knowledge stops somewhere over here, you know what I'm saying? And they jumped all the way past their knowledge to make a conclusion, you know? Now that doesn't necessarily mean they're being dishonest in the traditional sense. Now, I still certify stuff like that as dishonest, right? Now, I will not say a person is lying when they're doing that, but they are being dishonest because you know for a fact you didn't do what it took to know that information. You know what I'm saying? Like, so, you know, you took a dishonest approach. Now, you weren't trying to lie, but you lied. You made a gamble. And that gamble was a lie. You made a gamble to say, even though I know I haven't actually studied this thing, I've heard enough people say it, so it must be true, I'm going to say it. That was your gamble. That was your dishonest approach right there. Now, I'm not going to call you a bad person. You foul, evil, wicked, wretched thing. I'm not a Christian where I treat anybody in such a manner. And I don't believe in perfections to have even such a standard to hold people to. But it is ultimately learning that some people have divides that just need to be bridged. And if we can ask how over who, we might be able to be more helpful. Because then what we might realize is when we ask how this bridge can be divided, oh, is this going to take some exposure to quite a few classes? And then at that moment, that might lead you to be intellectually honest to say, hey, I'm not the person to teach those classes. You know what I'm saying? Because man, you have no idea how many people have gotten further messed up in bad theology, bad pathology, bad ideology, not just because of someone else trying to take on that road to bridge the divide. And so now you just move from the bullshit you was on to some new bullshit. Ooh, man, because they don't want to deal with the conversation. That is so true. That is so true. All right. So again, it's not always how can this divide be bridged? Or it's not, it should be, how can it be bridged? Not necessarily, how can I bridge it? So now that's what it is if it's a gap. But then you also have to know if you're dealing with the knowledge trap, right? So, because what we're talking about today is how to keep rising through these conversations. You also want to know when it's a knowledge trap. When it's a knowledge trap, no, they've got some liberation to do. They got to work on their own mind salvation, if you will. No, they've got some liberation to do. Some disagreements aren't rooted in a misunderstanding. They're rooted in manipulation. They're rooted in indoctrination. They're rooted in control. You're not even talking to those people anymore. You're talking to the people who taught them. You're talking to the people who convinced them. And, you know, it's pretty obvious when you're in a conversation with someone who's bought into that type of level of thing, because it's always, if you just read such and such, you'll be convinced. Or if you just watch such and such's video, you'll be convinced. That's a telltale sign that this person is not actually engaged in critical thinking. This is a person who just heard somebody who convinced them. This isn't a person who heard something that they understood, because again, when a person understands something, and dang, this is good stuff. When a person understands something, they can communicate what they understand. They can tell you what they understand. They can tell you what it is. But when they just go off to, well, if you just watch such and such, you just watch, typically fill in my favorite apologist, then you will know, you know. And so at that moment, you're not debating logic, you're dodging landmines. So disengage. When it's a knowledge gap, you're just looking for the bridge. There may be a way to bridge this. I may or may not be able to be a part of that bridge. When it's a knowledge trap, disengage. This person is indoctrinated. We're going to need some special help here. We're going to need some special stuff here, right? And then also, there's also a knowledge cap. A knowledge cap is a little different too. In this case, they've got some growing up to do. Some arguments aren't about knowledge or understanding. They're about ego, immaturity, or willful ignorance. If someone refuses to evolve or self-reflect, don't waste your evolution trying to convince them, all right? And there's a double-sided coin to this, all right? Number one, you have to respect people's refusal not to grow. Once you see it, you know what? You just don't want to grow. I'm going to leave this here. That's when you know, like, you can't possibly be here in good faith, because in good faith, you'd be trying to grow, right? So you have to know that, nope, this is a knowledge cap. You have put this cap on and have decided this is where I stop. This is where my learning stopped. I don't want to know anything else about this. And the funny thing about those knowledge caps is people put them on in all different areas of their life. Sometimes people put on a religious knowledge cap. Sometimes they put on a nutritional knowledge cap. But when you're dealing in a conversation, that you know you're dealing with someone who has decided that has decided that I don't want to know anything beyond this. You're dealing with that cap. Your job is not to try to convince them. Otherwise, taking us back to that conversation we kind of hit earlier, otherwise you may be running the risk to causing unnecessary harm just to convince the other person that they're wrong. You know what I'm saying? And if we're engaging conversations from the humanist perspective, which means one of my goals is to do my best to preserve and to protect human well-being and all of my engagements, and to delimit the amount of human harm, then that means I need to be constantly questioning kind of myself to say, am I doing something right now that might just be contributing to some unnecessary harm, right? Is this good? Like, because and that's the line you start crossing when you're dealing with trying to convince someone, right? There's a line. Like we even understand that now. Persuasion, yeah, it's one of the ways that we speak. Persuasion is a beautiful art form. I got that gift. I love it. You know, persuasion is wonderful, but there is a point where persuasion switches over from persuasion to grooming. You understand? Like, you know what I'm saying? And at that moment, you're not dealing with concern. At that moment, you're not dealing with concern. At that moment, this becomes toxicity. You know what I'm saying? This is good. This is good. At this moment, it leads to toxicity. So you're not being arrogant by disengaging. In many cases, that way you're actually being more humane. You know, you're just refusing to keep arguing with someone who's committed to misunderstanding. You know, it's okay to pay attention to that. It's okay to recognize that a person is committed to this misunderstanding. You know, and let me help you out, because some of y'all still got that Christian bathwater in you where you got to make somebody feel like a dumbass when they're like, you don't have to point it out. I know, I got it too, you know. And I mean, there are times that calls for it, but you don't have to point it out. When you recognize that someone is committed to misunderstanding, you don't have to say, well, you know what? I just see that you committed to misunderstanding, so I'm going to end it right here. You don't actually have to do that, because at that moment, the question that I'd ask you is, what is your aim in communicating that at that moment, right? Come on, man, this is good. This is good for all of us. I'm literally having to slap my own hand as I'm having this conversation, because I'm like, oh, damn, that's what I would do. You know what? I'm just going to leave this conversation because I see that you are committed to your misunderstanding. I don't even have to make that announcement. I can take a more humane exit. Oh, my goodness. Like, you know, like when you're driving down the street and there's an exit you can take, right? You know, like there's the crashing into the other vehicles, or there's the most humane way possible. We can choose to take the humane exits. Is that good? Dang, this is good. So no, when I realize that someone is committed to their misunderstanding, what I can do is committed to preserving what may be possible left in a friendship or the relationship, if that's important, because there are some people who have misunderstandings, right? There are some people who have misunderstandings that may not be worth continuing to engage on any level, right? And those are just congruency issues. Now, and those are things we're going to all have to grow up and wrestle with anyway, is that there are certain people that don't have to be bad people for you not to want them in your life. You know, it's just an issue of congruency. No, what works for you don't really work for me. And if we're around each other, we probably going to aggravate the hell out of each other. So you work over there and I'm going to work over here. And I mean, like way over there, you know, way over there. You know, it works that way. So that's another reason, just always look for opportunities. Villainizing someone is not always the route we have to take. That doesn't have to be the route we take. Okay. So anyway, man, somebody type "keep rising" in the chat if this has been good for you, man. If this conversation has been on point today, will you type "keep rising" in the chat? And of course, don't forget to share this with somebody who you care about. All right. So disagreement isn't always your assignment, right? Rising sometimes looks like reframing, and other times it looks like releasing. Ask yourself, is this disagreement inviting growth, or is it demanding energy with no return? Is it a gap? You know, is it a trap, or is it a cap? And if it's a gap, build the bridge. If it's a trap, cut the cord. And if it's a cap, let them sit in it. You don't got to be Captain Save a Hoe. You know what I'm saying? Don't save her. She don't want to be saved. You understand? Because sometimes the highest form of rising is choosing peace over performance. You know? Keep rising. Oh, I love that. Yes. Okay, so now let's talk contrasting values and beliefs. People prioritize different moral, religious, or psychological principles, right? We see this. A religious person may say they oppose abortion based on faith. Now, we know if they're Christian, they're lying because the Bible doesn't say that. But anyway, that's a whole other thing. Whole other topic. I'm not going to go there right now. Catch me on Monday through Friday. Sunday is community. We're people-centric today, trying to help folk. All right. So while a secular person may support this based on bodily autonomy, Now, if the disagreement is value or belief-based, it's not a conversation. It's a competition. I know that's going to be a hard pill to swallow, but I introduced this yesterday. Last week. I softballed this last week just so that we'd be ready for it this week, so nobody would be too surprised. Okay, if you're arguing values or beliefs, if the disagreement is values or beliefs, please know this is not a conversation. It's a competition at this moment. It's a measurement of subjective supremacy. This isn't going anywhere good. Oh man, it's not the route. I don't think. Now again, this is my opinion. Right? I don't think it is ever wise or even practical to argue values or beliefs. I'm not even going to argue that. I'm not going to argue my values, and I'm not going to argue my beliefs, because the moment we get in that conversation, we're no longer in a conversation, we're in a competition. We're trying to choose whose subjectivity is more supreme. The only way ahead that I see may be discussing the reasons, not the values. All right. Maybe discussing the reasons, not the beliefs, because that's the root of the disagreement. The disagreement is not what you value. The disagreement is not what you believe. It's the reasoning that led us to those differing values. It's the reasoning that led us to those different beliefs. That's where the conversation is. We value different things because we use different methodologies to determine their worth. All right. So the methodology is where the discussion needs to be. A belief is the output. The methodology is the equation. Right? The belief is the output of the thinking that I've done. I don't want to deal with the output. I want to deal with the thinking. And so if we're going to have a conversation that doesn't lead to fistfights, then instead of us dealing with the values or the belief, which are things that people identify with as deeply personal, instead of doing that, let's talk about the methodology. This reduces the amount of personal attachment and decreases the propensity for defense, hopefully helping to restore the position of curiosity to all participants in the conversation. Now, I know y'all are like, now, Darante, that's good. Darante LaMar, damn it, boy, that's good. But how do we do that? How am I in a conversation and you're talking about, we need to be talking about methodology? How do I just shift the conversation in an argument to start talking about the methodological differences as opposed to the values differences, as opposed to the belief differences? Because again, I think those are just way too personal and many times way too far removed from what we really need to be talking about. You know what I'm saying? Because think about it. If someone's values are, I believe something that I inherently also look at as no, that's a horrible value, then we're going to be competing in that conversation. There's no real room for dialogue there. And that's being honest, that's being humble. You know what I'm saying? No, because you're not going to convince me that what you're saying is something that should be valuable. And you see how I'm showing you that in that case, when we're debating values, we're actually in a competition at that moment. Or when we're disagreeing about values, we're in a competition. But the real way ahead is actually figuring out, okay, well, how did I get to this place? How did I get to these values? Why did I start talking about this? And so one of the things you can do is name the frame. Begin by recognizing, again, that people arrive at beliefs using different reasoning systems. All right. There can be emotion-based reason systems, which means I arrived at this idea because of how it makes me feel. Could have been nothing else but that. This makes me feel good. This idea makes me feel good. This value makes me feel good. There, we could have a conversation there, because then we could start talking about, well, why is this what makes you feel? And I promise you, man, when you start getting into the 5 whys, you can have some real conversation. But then there's other times people have authority-based, authority-based reasoning methodologies, So I believe this because my parents said this, or my pastor said this. I value this because every politician I've ever heard say that this is what we should value. I believe this because this is what all of my teachers said. This is an authority-based way of approaching reasoning. But then there's also people who have a traditional way, or who approach it from a way of tradition, which is what's always been done, And typically what's always been done is defined by what we were emotionally attached to, and affiliated to through authority. So it's typically like a combination of the two above. When people have an attachment to a tradition, there is almost always, when people have an attachment to a tradition, I don't want to run the risk of making an absolute statement here, but there is almost always an emotional attachment and an authority-based attachment at the same time. It is, yes, this tradition makes me feel good. It brings me good memories. And also, Mom and Pa used to do this too. And they told me this is the best way to do it. You know what I'm saying? So yes. Oh, I love this so much. Oh, so what's always been done. And then there's also consequential, which this is where as a pragmatist, this is where I go a lot. I do. This is one of the reasons I'm not a God. I'm not an atheist, is because I say one of the reasons I'm not a God. That's just one of the reasons, Darante, just one of the reasons you're not a God. But no, one of the reasons I am an atheist, one of the reasons I'm not a theist, is because I find no consequence in the idea of a God, and not with so much time on the table. Now if we were still like in year 1 through 10, maybe, and I'm like, nah, he ain't introduced himself in 10 years. Then maybe we made that up. But we're in year 2025 after like 200,000. So it's like yikes. So consequential, which means what the outcomes are. What is the utility of this? What does this lead to? And then also empirical, which is also something that I lean into. What evidence support this? Now, the only reason I don't lean into empirical, as the reason I lean into consequential probably more than empirical, and this is not necessarily part of the conversation as much as it is just me giving you insight into me, is because there has been too much metaphysical allowed in the empirical space. And so sometimes people can have an empirical conversation that has absolutely no utility, and I'm not necessarily interested in that. So it means, like, even if we do convince everybody that what you're saying is true, what can we do with that truth? Not a damn thing. So why are we wasting this type of precious energy? See, that's as a pragmatist. Now, I'm not suggesting that everybody should be like that, because the truth of the matter is, if everybody was like that, it would severely limit what we could know as a species. It would limit what we would pursue. So I don't need everybody else to be like that. I'm just telling you that's me, and I'm okay with it. You heard? Oh man, I love y'all. Okay, so some questions to ask, some questions that we can ask is, how did you come to that conclusion? Man, I love y'all. I see the activity in the chat. I'm not touching it today, because if I touch it, it's gonna make it slow down, and I don't want to do that. So y'all pray, hallelujah, that your boy gets some production help over here. And if you haven't already, make sure you share the stream. Share the stream. Please don't be screaming at people, okay? Share the stream. All right, the questions you want to ask, and you can ask this to yourself and you can ask with other people, is how did we come to that conclusion? You know what I'm saying? How can we come to that conclusion? What do you base that on? All right. What does that belief do for you? See, this isn't aggressive at this moment. It's curious. It redirects the conversation from clashing claims to comparing cognitive maps. Oh man, here's something I don't know if anybody's ever said to you before, but it's okay to get really curious about people you disagree with. It's okay. Oh, it's so okay. Now, mind you, the context of this session of disagreement therapy, the context of disagreement therapy is really talking about conversations with people that you love, conversations with people that you care about, family members, your children, those are family members too, by the way, your friends, people that you work with, people that you're dealing with in close proximity to. This is not necessarily for trolls. Now, I think y'all know I don't really engage with trolls. Why? Because it has to be good faith. But I want to take it that step further, especially to when talking about comparing cognitive maps. There is real value in understanding the mind of people you disagree with, you know? I mean, like, damn. And again, it's like comparing cognitive maps. What thoughts, what information tidbits, what little data points led me to this idea in this framing, and what data points and nodes and nodules led you to your cognitive framing. And having that type of curiosity doesn't mean that I want to come to your side. And I told you, this is why one of the reasons I'm not a big fan of debates per se. I don't say debates are bad. Now, I do think we should stop debating people who believe bullshit. I do think we should do that. But I prefer conversations where we can find a greater utility out of the outcomes of the conversation. And us understanding the minds of people who do things that we disagree with, the minds of people who do things that are harmful, the minds of people who believe things that are harmful, for us to kind of to be curious about that cognitive mapping. I don't see how that couldn't be helpful in our ability to become even better communicators and to better understand what's at risk, you know? Dang, this is good stuff, man. Oh, shoot, this is good stuff. All right, so that was kind of named the frame. Next one, surface the strategy, all right? Once they start sharing the reasoning, reflect it back. So it sounds like your belief is grounded in authority, like scripture or spiritual tradition. It sounds like your attachment to this might be because you really do love and respect your grandmother, you know, and because of everything that she sacrificed for you to be here. And so it seems like just maybe, because of that, because of her being who she was, that was enough for you to be convinced. You didn't need anything more than that because you didn't want to run the risk of dishonoring her. Would I be wrong when I say that? I don't want to make it sound like you don't know what you're talking about. I'm just suggesting that possibly that you love Big Mama so much that you never actually checked to see if she might have done the work. And maybe that might, you see, and just kind of having conversations like that, it also even helps you to helps a person acknowledge a knowledge gap that they might not have even known was there, may not even realize that was there, and be like, oh, damn, you're right. I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. I really just believe this because my Uncle Jojo had always said this. Like, just, you know, like, oh man, is this good or not? Like, you know, all right, okay. You know, so, you know, or you can also pay attention, like people, like this is one you can use with me a lot. Okay, I notice you're mostly looking at this from a results-based angle, like what causes the least harm. But see, when you do this, you're not just discussing values anymore. Now you're evaluating decision-making. You're evaluating these frameworks that leads to the decision, and this gives you and the other people in the conversation a shared language and space for critique without personal attack, right? Because it is possible to critique without attack. Now, I'm telling you, if you come for me in my comments, I'm going to attack your ass because we don't have a relationship. Let me go ahead and give you a good lesson right here. Relationship is the prerequisite for conversations with me. Yeah, I'm one of those stranger danger folks. I don't just be talking to random folk like that, bro. So if you just jump in my comments and you say something off wall, I'm going to treat you like a stranger, okay? I'm going to treat you like you're a random who just popped up and said something, and that your words have no utility against me, and my words have no utility against me, and so I'm going to treat you like a little yo-yo troll and just troll the hell out of your ass to get the most out of the algorithm as I can, because I'm not a Christian anymore, and I don't have to be humble, and I have no problem with manipulating a motherfucker to get what I want out of a moment. And so if I see that you were stupid enough to go back and forth with a bot, I'm going to bot the hell out of your ass, but that is because we do not have the prerequisite of good faith or relationship. Now, if we have the prerequisite of good faith and relationship, then I'm going to do my best to have this conversation with critique, oh man, with critique and not attack, to invite parallel. This is good. All right, so now invite parallel evaluation. All right, so it's then asked, can we talk about how our different reasoning methods might lead us to different conclusions, even if we're both being thoughtful and intentional? See, this keeps the door open for mutual curiosity. You're not attacking their belief, you're inviting them to examine how they believe. That's where growth happens at. When we argue values, we argue identities. When we discuss how we came to those values, we explore intellect, worldview, and human complexity. The goal isn't to win someone over, it's to figure out whether your operating systems are even compatible enough to run the same program. So the next time you hit a wall, try asking, would you be open to talk about how we got here, not just what we believe? Oh my goodness, is this good? That's how we stop fighting over values and start building understanding around methods. Okay? All right. So what we're getting out of this is that there can be different priorities and interests. We can see that. We can see this. There can be different priorities and interests. I'm messing with the screen again. Now it's going to mess with my stuff. All right. So conflicts emerge. Oh, snap. Something's trying to pop up. Let me see what this is. Conflicts emerge when people's personal or group interests do not align. All right. This is a reality. Conflicts emerge when people's personal or group interest, they do not align. They are not in alignment. Oh man. So most conflicts aren't about who's right. They're about what each person wants most. Okay. And that's something that it's absolutely fine to keep in mind. It's absolutely fine to keep in mind that this conversation might not even be about right or wrong, but this conversation might be about who wants what and why, and how bad they want it, and what they're willing to do to get it, right? And it's what they want in the moment. You get a lot of examples of these in everyday life. But this, to kind of add to this, I often say that discipline is not about punishment. And trust me, I'm going somewhere with this. I often say that discipline is not about punishment. It's about the goal, right? And so discipline is about goal alignment. In the same way, disagreements shouldn't be about winning. They should be about understanding. Because when we focus on winning, we miss the opportunity to walk away with something more valuable. Clarity, And so the question becomes, how can parties with different priorities align during a disagreement? Now let's walk through a clear framework. Number one, identify the actual priority, Identify it often. What people say they want isn't always the full story. Ask clarifying questions. Like, what outcomes matters most to you? Like, what are you really trying to protect or achieve? This starts peeling back the layers because most priorities are just subconscious strategies in disguise, which means sometimes the thing that people are disagreeing with you about is not even something they really care about. It's just like it's a slippery slope for them. It is a domino. It's a placeholder that they know if I give in to this, if I say that this might not be what I think it is, then it's going to leave this other area in my life vulnerable for investigation. And so I don't want to talk about that area. So anything that even gets close to sounding like it might be going somewhere that I don't want it to go, subconsciously I might lock down and try and try to shut that conversation down. You see how that works? So a goal then becomes to find shared ground beneath competing goals. Even when two priorities clash, there's often a shared core value underneath. So you got to ask, what could success look like for both of us? This moves the conflict from either or to how can we? What could success look like for both of us in the event that success for neither of us creates inhumanity for anybody? You know, that's the caveat. Should be unsaid, but nowadays I realize you got to say this stuff. You got to say it. All right. Another one is to name the trade-offs openly. People don't like losing, but by far and large, they respect fairness. Instead of pretending that both sides can get 100% of what they want, be honest. If we push for X, it might mean sacrificing Y. Are we okay with that? This helps frame the disagreement not as a war, but as a negotiation with room for mutual benefit and realistic boundaries. And these are the ways that the reason these things become important, because then you realize that even in disagreement, the goal is not always to create agreement. The goal is to make sure that we align. Oh man, I don't know if you've ever thought about this before, that it's possible for us to have areas of disagreement while still preserving areas of alignment. You know, as a person who's been politically active, this is something that I've had to understand over and over again. The people who have been the most effective in doing some of the greatest work that I've seen, which are people who typically don't always get the credit for it because history likes to tell their story a little differently. But those people learned how to create alignment, and many times where agreement was not possible. But what you will begin to realize once you separate from superstition, you realize agreement isn't even always necessary. Oh my goodness. Like, I feel like that could be a whole damn conversation right there. Agreement isn't always necessary, but alignment many times is, you know. So this is good. So sometimes alignment doesn't mean full agreement. It means coordinated effort despite differences. So you think of an orchestra, the instruments are playing different notes, but they're following the same sheet music. And so alignment and disagreement looks like shared expectations and agreed upon process and a willingness to collaborate, even if the motivations differ. You know, so you ask, what can we both agree to move forward on, even if we're coming from different places? And again, the context of these conversations, these are about the people you love. You know what I'm saying? So I know sometimes some of these ideologies can get a little uncomfortable for you because your mind immediately goes to the big bad in your head of the people who are, you know, out there doing just tremendous things. Well, you know, unless they live in your neighborhood and live in your house, these shouldn't be the people you're immediately thinking about. Immediately, you should be working on improving the conversations of the people who are around you. And then, believe it or not, the more you work that muscle, it's going to make it easier and more comfortable for you to engage conversations of greater complexity. This is good, man. Why couldn't the church have been like this? If all the years of my life, church was like this, oh my goodness, I'd probably be in a better place. Oh man, this is good. This is good, man. All right, so final thought for this part: disagreement becomes dangerous when it's only about whose needs get met, all right? But when we see it as a path toward shared alignment, we create something bigger than winning. We create movement. See, it's not necessarily about matching priorities. It's about matching directions. You know, sometimes I say, stay progressive, keep rising, all right? Sometimes it's just, man, let's just keep moving forward the best we can. It's not always about matching priorities, because again, we kind of talked about in the beginning of this conversation that, man, our priorities going to be different as a mug because our lived experiences have been different. You know, this is just the reality. But I think better is something we can all aim for. I think better is something we can all that we can all agree is something everybody wants a little bit of. And see, that's an issue of direction. So next time you hit a conflict of interest, ask, what's the shared future that we're trying to create here? You know, because if you can find that, you can move forward together, even if your reasons are different. Dang, this is good. Oh man, I've got to get this technology fixed because I see the super chats coming in and I can't even acknowledge them because if I press something, it's going to make my system go bad. All right. We also got to hit cognitive biases and logical fallacies. Is this okay, everybody? Is this good conversation? Are y'all enjoying this? Is this helpful? That's the big question. Is it helpful? Not just is it enjoyable? Because I promise you, I'm a fairly entertaining person, and I've heard that I'm not too bad on the eyes. But what I want to know is this helpful? Are you getting some tools here that are going to help you navigate some conversations with the people you care about? Because honestly, community is built around conversations. If we can have healthier conversations, we can cultivate healthier communities. Man, I love it. Oh, I love y'all. Y'all are awesome. Y'all are awesome. So let's talk about cognitive biases and logical fallacies. All right. People often have unconscious biases or use flawed reasoning. People often come to conversations not just with different views, but with distorted thinking, and they don't even realize it, you know? And so here's a question that I've begun to wrestle with over the past few years in my life, and that is calling out biases and fallacies in others effective? It's a question. It's a serious question. I've been wrestling with it for a while. Or calling out, because, I'm good at it. I can call it out so quickly. And typically I don't. I try not to call it out in conversations. I will call it out in a video where I am breaking it down. And that is for the benefit of the audience who's watching the video. But I'm not so sure if calling it out in the middle of a conversation is actually helpful. I don't know if giving it a name helps more than finding a way to navigate it. So me knowing that you're straw manning, me knowing that you're too quoqueing, I hope I'm saying that right, because there's another word that could be, me knowing that and me calling that out doesn't necessarily help the conversation. And I'm afraid that sometimes, especially in this debate culture, that is what we do. Sometimes we prioritize being the person who can say, I know what it is, while still not trying to be the person who can say, I know what to do about it, though. All right. So to me, it is not as impressive to be able to say, oh, I know that's a slippery slope fallacy, or I know this is a no true Scotsman fallacy. I think it's time for us as a community, because I think by far and large, we've been really good at knowing shit. You know what I'm saying? Like that's been the whole slogan of the secular community is, I drink coffee and I know shit, or I smoke weed and I know shit, or I go bowling and I know shit. But now it's time for us to, let's take what we know and let's do something. Make that knowing shit mean something to people who are out here struggling. Let's make that, to me, the only true sign of intelligence is what you can take that intelligence and do something with the world with. That's the true sign. So now it's time for us to take that level. Yes, I know that this is a straw man, but because I know that you're using a straw man fallacy, I also know how to navigate that to get you back on the path of truth. See, to me, that's a more worthwhile pursuit, but that's going to take some work, ain't it? That's going to take some work. I'm not claiming by any stretch of the imagination to be the person who has all of these answers or anything. I'm saying these are the conversations that we need to be having. So if we say, hey, that's a straw man, or you're using slippery slope, or that's just confirmation bias, that is often just going to sound like an attack to people, not an invitation to think more deeply. So what we need to realize is that I know what it is for me, not for them. I know what it is so that I know what I'm dealing with. Oh, man. Because if I'm just calling it out, it puts people on the defensive, not in dialogue. You know what I'm saying? That's it. So if I know X is the fallacy, then my question is, what is Y if Y is the strategy? So again, I want to know fallacies and biases for two things. For self-awareness, not weaponry. The real power in understanding cognitive bias is to check yourself, not just others. It does help me know. Yeah, it does. It does help me know when I'm dealing in a conversation with someone who's taking those mental shortcuts and are not doing the work of engagement, because it helps me, not waste my time. But it also helps me check myself to constantly kind of ask myself, am I defending this because it's true or because I'm afraid of being wrong? You know, am I listening to understand or just to confirm what I already think? We can't lead others to clarity if we're not clear ourselves, you know? And so what I wanna add here is to use tactics, not labels. So instead of saying what someone's doing wrong, respond with a strategy that redirects the conversation. So if you recognize it as a false equivalence, you could say, now, do you think both of those situations have the same level of impact? All right. So like, oh damn. See, now I want to make some whole flashcards on these. And don't tempt me. I might. I don't know if y'all have noticed, we're doing digital content now on Windows Shop, and it's kind of dope. And like, I'm tempted to do a digital content guide for everything we do, but of course that adds more work to me right now. But the big point is, now that I know what the fallacy is, now that I know what the biases are, we can start building strategies to navigate through those, you know? So again, if you recognize a straw man, you can redirect the conversation towards clarity. This way you keep control of the tone and the trajectory of the conversation, again, without allowing it to drop down into a place of attacks, you know? Another thing is practice bias spotting as internal reflection. Instead of turning bias detection into a combat sport, use it as a mindfulness tool during the conversation. Ask yourself, why do I believe what I believe? What assumptions am I bringing in? What would I still believe, or would I still believe this if I were raised in a different environment? And let me tell you something. Even if you already know or think you know the answers to these questions, ask them to yourself honestly every time. Number one, because that is you exercising a muscle, that is you giving yourself a memory, that is you giving yourself a moment. And if the answers are different, that is you giving yourself data. You know what I'm saying? But also, number two, if the other person you're having a conversation with has never seen that type of mindfulness or awareness modeled, you are now helping them get that exposure. You know, kind of takes us back to that adage, be the change that you want to see. You know what I'm saying? So if you see, oh, this is good, man. So you start asking yourselves, oh, I want to do it. And you ask it out loud. You know, sometimes we gotta bring those questions out loud. Now, another good reason is to do that, just bring the stuff out loud, because you'd be surprised how much of a conversation you're having with other people in your own head. And I watch this happen so often with a lot of misunderstandings and conversations. The misunderstandings are happening because the two people are having a conversation, but half of the things that they're arguing about aren't even things that they're saying. It's the extended part of the conversation that they're having in their mind, and they're responding to the extended cut of the conversation. Oh, that's good. That's good. So when you start building that muscle to bring that extended cut conversation outside, into the public, it gives everybody involved, including yourself, an opportunity to inspect everything that is impacting this moment right now. And then if you add that external mindfulness tool of asking yourself these just very basic questions, whatever you're arguing about, you could be arguing about whether or not you're going to Popeyes or Church's Chicken tonight. Ask yourself out loud, why do I think Church's Chicken is the move for the night? Like, why am I really attached to that? And the answer may be something simple. You know what? I just saw Church's commercial today, and damn, them honey biscuits looked so good. I think I'm the only person in my house that liked Church's. But damn, the honey biscuits. Okay, I'm hungry now. I am super duper hungry. All right. So the big point is you ask those questions out loud. Number one, they help you better engage the conversation. They help you better engage your own thoughts. But then number two, they help model healthy questioning in the conversation where you're not having to direct that question towards the other person. Because if you're directing it towards the other person, they're not learning as much from that because they're ciphering every question you ask them as a potential attack. Every question you ask them, in most cases, they're treating it like a Trojan horse. There is likely something in this motherfucker that is set to trip me up. But when you're just asking questions to yourself out loud, you're creating the safety for them to do the same thing by modeling that. This models intellectual humility and invites the other person to do the same without forcing it, you know? So biases and fallacies aren't just the flaws in others' thinking, there's that Southern coming out. They're also the hidden habits in our own. Knowing them isn't just about calling out, it's also about calling in toward clarity, toward fairness, and toward curiosity. And when we navigate them with grace, we rise through disagreement, not necessarily just by winning debates, but by deepening understanding. And honestly, that's what I want, man. I want a deeper understanding. Oh my goodness, this is good stuff. All right, so, oh man, we've been getting through this. We've been flowing through this. I love y'all are hanging out with me. I saw someone said frozen screen. I do see the rates are kind of slowing down now. So just hang out with me a little longer. Let's see how this goes. All right, here we go. So our goal here, again, to keep rising, deepening understandings, even through arguments. Now, a key insight that I want to hit here, because this is popular, you're going to run into this. You're going to run into this constantly in conversations, and that is consensus, an argument from consensus. Consensus is often used as a substitute for comprehension in conversations, all right? And that's not always bad. It's human. It's completely natural. We don't all have time to become experts in every field, right? We simply don't. So we rely on consensus as a kind of shortcut. So we say things like, well, most scientists say, you know, that's if we're being healthy. If we're not even being healthy, we'll just say scientists say, or all of the scientists say, but we'll say most scientists say, or the news that I trust says, or, you know, or everybody I know thinks this. And ultimately, I want to be careful with this. That's fine until consensus becomes a shield against deeper thinking, right? Because again, consensus, appealing to consensus is still fallacy. You don't know something to be true because scientists agree that something is true, all right? That's the consensus you're leaning on, but that has not given you knowledge. It's okay to say, I'm going to trust that because I don't have time, to do anything further. But don't take it that extra step and say, no, I know this because the scientists know this. That's not how this, they may know this, but until you actually know it, you don't know it. You're leaning into consensus. And again, it's understandable. Many of the fallacies and the biases we've taken in life are shortcuts that help us navigate, but it's when we're not careful, that's when it turns into superstition, wearing a lab coat or a flag, or as we've seen repeatedly, a cross, So what do we do now? How can we help others feel safe admitting their belief is based on consensus and not comprehension in a conversation? Here's what works. And this is, I don't know if y'all noticed, but this is what I really do try to spend a lot of time doing in these videos. Normalize the shortcut, As much as I talk about religious superstition, and I do a good job of talking about it, like I give that motherfucker a blackout every chance I get, right? But if you notice my conversations, and you can go back to the very beginning, the goal is always to show that this was a very normal part of our process that we've now got to normalize a different way. So the first thing is normalize the shortcut, normalize the shortcut. Say something like, honestly, I used to think that too. It just made the most sense with what I knew at the time. It's okay. Normal. Most of us trust consensus until we have a reason not to. That's human. It's okay to trust the consensus, but do not confuse your trust with your knowledge. Because again, that is a logical fallacy. Here's a rule of thumb. You do not know anything that you do not know. You knowing the scientists know it, or again, you can't know the scientists know it until you know what the scientists know. And if you knew what the scientists knew, you would not appeal to the consensus, you just speak to the knowledge. And so Again, it's a shortcut that we all take. It's a shortcut that we all have, but it's something we should be mindful of. We should know that it's human. I'm doing this, but if you ever get pulled into a conversation and you find yourself arguing from consensus, it's likely time to check yourself. That doesn't mean you're arguing the wrong thing. It likely means you're the least qualified person to have the argument, which at that moment, it means you're being intellectually dishonest or the other person is being intellectually dishonest, which is one of the reasons that I'm a smart guy. I consider myself a very bright bulb. But when a very well-named wanted to debate me on evolution, and at that time, I didn't have 18,000 subscribers. We probably had maybe 2,000 or 3,000 subscribers at the time. I was still just an up-and-coming young whippersnapper, which I think I still am. But they wanted to debate me. I immediately called out the intellectual dishonesty of such. That no, if we're going to be having a conversation about biology, and this is serious, we're being good faith, we're talking about evolution, we're talking about evolutionary biology, why would the person you reach for be some random YouTuber who's not an evolutionary biologist? Not one of my videos had even been on that subject. And so at that moment, even though I do believe I could have stood my ground, at that moment, I'm like, no, this is being intellectually dishonest for them to even want me to engage this conversation when there are qualified people available. You see? And so that's that other thing is realizing, like, wait a minute, I'm not the one even qualified to speak on this. Yes, I believe this, but I believe this by consensus. Now, if you want to talk to somebody about this, if you want to have a disagreement about somebody on this, I shouldn't be leading a disagreement over something I believe by consensus. No, oh man, yikes. Because at that moment, if I could do the work to no longer have to believe it by consensus and to actually just know it. All right, that's good, right? Good stuff. Y'all are amazing. I love this community. I love this community. Over 50 people right now tuning in to a people-centric conversation on a Sunday afternoon. This is absolutely amazing. So listen, when people feel safe to be human, they're more likely to explore, all right? So focus on curiosity, not correction. You're nobody's mama. You're nobody's daddy. Nobody owes you their obedience. Nobody owes you to be smart. Nobody needs to be smarter just because you want them to be. Nobody needs to be better just because you want them to be. Nobody needs to come to your side of thinking just because you want them to. They don't owe you that. And the quicker we remember that it takes work to human. Oh, damn it. Oh, man, this is good. The sooner we remember that, the better a job we do of remembering that, we begin to realize that, oh, yeah, being human actually takes work, that working with other folk actually takes work. It takes work. I'm going to have to work at this. And so, nope, I'm not out here trying to correct other folk. I'm curious. So curiosity, not correction. Ask, where did you first hear that? What made that explanation click for you? Why was that the thing that when you heard that, you said, yeah, I'm going to stay on here. I'm going to stay right here. Because if it turned out to be wrong, what would that mean for you? This moves the conversation from debate to discovery. And again, this is in the context of people that you care about, people that you're in relationship with, And so what's the right move? What's the right next move after they admit that? Because this part is delicate because you're at a tipping point. You can either open the doors to growth or you could make them shut it again out of shame or fear. And so here's the framework. Don't humble them. Help them rebuild, So it's nothing wrong with saying, hey, you're not dumb for trusting that. You were just trusting your sources. Now offer agency, not embarrassment, Want to walk through this from the ground up together? Let's see what the source actually says. I'm curious too. This is how we got so many people So many people who attach themselves to false ideologies because they got more attached to consensus than comprehension. They said, no, enough people who think like me think this is true. Enough people who look like me thinks this is true. Enough people who shows up on my favorite news program says this is true. You know, my favorite group of atheists say this is true. And it's like, yep, that's fine. But that is it's a substitute for actually knowing whether something is true or not. And so we have the opportunity to frame the moment as a pivot, not a loss, right? So you can invite people to upgrade from consensus to comprehension without throwing out trust. Consensus is where we start, but comprehension is how we decide where we stand. You know, this builds a bridge between people who rely on consensus because they trust institutions with very good reason, and people who question consensus because they've been burned before. Both can be valid. The goal is to model discernment, not demand agreement. Consensus can be a safe shortcut, but when it becomes a permanent parking spot, we stop thinking and start defending. In a good faith conversation, our job isn't to drag people out of their beliefs. It's to walk them through the door that they didn't even know was open. And that door opens when they feel safe enough to say, I don't actually understand this, you know? And then we can respond with, let's figure it out together. Because the big point is to identify ways to keep rising. There is no final destination, only the next step. There is no singular truth, only the pursuit of understanding. We are not here to win. We're here to grow. You know, that's one of the most important things that I find that we need to understand and remember is that I'm not here to win over other people. I'm not here to make other people submit to me. I'm trying to grow in my experience. My commitment is through disagreement, through hardships and setbacks, is to keep rising. And I'm hoping this conversation has provided some tools to help us all take another step in that direction. So here we are at the edge of everything we've unpacked this weekend. We've talked about good faith. We talked about rising through disagreement. We explored what happens when we stop fighting to be right and start fighting to be real. We've examined the roots of disagreement, not just the noise on the surface, but the structure underneath. Bias, belief, methodology, misalignment, and most of all, the mutual utility of outcome. And now I want to leave you with this. Don't mistake disagreement for disconnection. Don't assume that because we clash, we're incapable of co-creating. Disagreement isn't the end of unity. It's the beginning of clarity. It's where you learn who's in it for power and who's in it for purpose. Because in this house, on this platform, we don't weaponize conflict. We work through it. We grow in it. We rise because of it. So the next time you find yourself in a tense exchange, ask yourself this: am I here to win or am I here to build? Because that one question, that one moment of reflection might be the difference between a conversation that breaks you and one that builds the bridge you've been waiting for your whole life. So listen, whether it's a disagreement with your partner, a clash in your community, or a tense online tension that tempts you to perform instead of progress, don't stop at the last rest area of your understanding. Take that next step, lean in with curiosity, check for clarity, assess the outcome, and then build what's possible. We're not here to fight to the death. We're here to rise through the dialogue. Let's keep rising together.